Brown's Variety, 1936 to 1983. Videotape and production for Public Access Channel 4, Bethel, Maine, by Samuel H. and Natalie H. Timberlake, June 1995. Acknowledgements to Jim and B. Brown, Rachel Brown McKay, Arlene Brown, the Bethel Historical Society, the Bethel Citizen, Randall Bennett, and any others who may have shared pictures or memories of Brown's Variety. This program is going to be about something that a lot of newcomers to Bethel will know nothing about, and those who've been here a while will be happy to learn more about the history of Jim Brown and Brown's Variety, which used to be on what is now a vacant lot at the corner of Main and Spring Street. Jim, would you start off and introduce us to your parents and let us know what this whole story is that's...
This is my father and mother, Leroy and Abby Brown, who lived on a farm with their 4 children in West Denmark, Maine, right across the line from Freiburg. We always went to school in Freiburg, did our shopping and all of our business there, so we almost believed we lived in Freiburg. In 1936, they decided they were ready to give up farming, and my brother and I were neither one interested in staying on the farm. They thought they would like to have a 5 and 10 cent store, and they picked Bethel as the location for it, as Bethel was about the size town they wanted to be in and had no 10-cent store. They had farmed for 20 years, so they knew nothing about running a store. But they had friends in Freiburg who had a 10-cent store, and they gave them a lot of information and advice. I got interested in the store, in their plan, and decided to go into business with them. So in July of 1936, we came to Bethel, my mother, my sister Rachel, who was 5 years old, and we rented the store on the corner of Main and Spring Street, which was the former Fox and Bean store. I don't recall how it was vacant at the time, and the Bethel Savings Bank owned it. So we rented it to them. I don't recall what the rent was, but I'm sure it was very reasonable. My folks had very little money, as they had lost most of their savings in the bank crash in 1932. About the first thing we did when we got to Bethel, we made out an order. I had $500 that I had saved working on a farm and in the mill and on the highway construction. And I decided to invest it in merchandise for the store. So we made out an order to Butler Brothers in New York, who had the franchises for Ben Franklin stores, but they sold to independents also. This store that we had rented had a front store and a back store. So of course the front store would be where we'd have our store. The back part we started building over into an apartment where we were to live. Miss Fox lived up on the second floor. She, I think, was a sister to Clarence Fox, the Fox of Fox and Bean. So we got the apartment made, and then we spread out the stock in the store very thinly, and made a fair showing, and opened Brown's Variety Store on August 20th, 1936. I don't recall how much we took in that day, but it wasn't very much. You have to take in a lot of sales if you make much money in selling 5 and 10 cent merchandise. And it was right in the middle of the Depression. So in a few days, my mother and my sister went back to the farm, and they were going to help close up the farm and move the rest of the family to Bethel. I tended the store while they were gone, and about a week, the rest of the family came to Bethel. My 2 sisters, Rachel and Arlene, and my father and mother. My brother, I think, had a job in Freiburg on a farm, so he didn't come till later in the fall. My father, in the meantime, had sold the livestock and the farm equipment, so they had some more money to invest in the store. Run 9-cent sales. We bought the sales of Butler Brothers, which consisted of about 500 sales sheets and the merchandise to back up what was advertised. Times a year. Shortly, about a month after we got open, we began to have salesmen from wholesalers from around the state of Maine and Massachusetts, so then we could buy more locally. It wasn't open too long before I realized that there just wasn't business enough there for 3 of us. So I got a job in the woods in the winter of 1937, cutting pulp for $1.75 a cord. That spring, I got a job at Tibbetts Spool Mill in Locks Mills. In 1940, I married Beatrice Brooks, a registered nurse from Pound. And I was working there when we tell how much you know.
Sure.
When Kenneth Brooks and I used to go out, used to run around a lot together, the movies and around everywhere. So he arranged a blind date, he and Bee did. She had a blind date for him, and he arranged a blind date for me with Bee. So I met her in 1939, and in 1940 we got married. And first apartment was on Paradise Street, upstairs over Venie Brown. I think we paid $8 a month rent. And in the summer of 1941, I got a job in Lewiston at J.J. Newberry's, and we moved to Auburn, another upstairs apartment on Washington Street. The war was on during this time, so, and we had 2 children while we were living there, Leroy and Linda. I was drafted in 1943 and sworn into the Coast Guard, where I served for 2 years. Guess that's the end of her turn.
Life was very, very hard for me. those next 2 years that Jim was in the service. I don't think that I could possibly have made it through if it hadn't been that his family was so wonderful to me. Arlene had, in 42, Arlene started school in Boston, art school. In the summer, she came home and got a job at a camp. And then that next fall, the fall before Jim was drafted, she went back to Boston to go to school. When she came home that summer, I had a boy about 18 months old and a girl about ready to be born. She went home to her family and visited for about 2 weeks, including helping to take care of my oldest boy, Leroy, while I was in the hospital and having Linda. Then she came back to live with us because she decided I needed a little help, and she got a job in Lewiston. Soon after she got the job in Lewiston, Jim was drafted. So then we started in worrying about his having to leave me. She decided that I needed her help more than she needed the schooling. So she didn't want to leave me alone in Lewiston that fall. I think it was about November, the last of October, that Jim had to leave for the service. His son was not quite 2 years old, and our daughter was about 4 months old. She spent the winter with me, working days and coming home and being with me evenings. In about April that next spring, my mother-in-law located an apartment because she wanted me to be up near her where she could help me and with the children, and if there was sickness or anything, she would be handy. So in May, she helped me move with the 2 children and get moved into the apartment. After that, every day, and sometimes twice a day, one of the family would come down to see how things were going and if I needed anything. The youngest sister of Jim's, Rachel, usually brought my mail down to me and stayed a few minutes to play with the children and give me a few free minutes. And that is the way that year went. My father-in-law knew that I loved gardening, so when he had his plot of land plowed up for a garden, he had the man come down and plow me a small piece of ground, about 12 by 20 feet probably. And nobody would believe the things that I raised in that small piece of ground. I even sold a lady that liked loose head lettuce, and she couldn't buy any in the store. About $6 worth of lettuce that summer. Then I bought my son a red wagon. Now in the house next to me was 2 other ladies that had 5 children between them, and their husbands were also in the service, so we had a lot in common. We really had sort of a mutual dooryard. So we had quite a few children, and I didn't dare to leave my children out by themselves without my eyes on them. Back there, dogs could run free, and there were plenty of dogs in Bethel. And then with children from 1 year old to 2.5, 5 of them plus my 2, which was that age, they really needed my constant attention, so I would work in my garden while I watched them that summer. Well, fall came, and one more winter got through. Now, that may sound with all that help that life was made easy, but it was not. You see, I was an outsider, so they thought, in Bethel. I could have gone anywhere but to Bethel to buy scarce foods and things from the natives. That was not pleasant. The government gave us points, and we had to have points to buy butter, shortening, meat, and that type of food. Well, I never was lucky enough to get to the stores in time to to spend all of my points. But that fall and summer and fall, I had canned about 300 jars of vegetables and produce. So that came in real handy, and I really needed that since I had so much trouble getting scarce food, and some foods were very scarce in the stores. Some items of food scarce, but clothes weren't that plentiful. Babies' clothes weren't the cute, pretty things that we can get nowadays. They were either pink for girls, blue for boys, and possibly white. And then they were kind of scarce to buy. I was very lucky because my mother-in-law liked to sew, and she really made most of my children's clothes for them, even coats and pants and little suits for the boy. And being that father was in the Coast Guard, the girl had a little sailor dress and the boy had a little sailor suit, which was very cute. Money was scarce too. I'm telling you, I had to be very, very careful. I think the maximum amount that I had, even after I had 3 children, was $90 a month. My husband sent me home as much of his allowance as he could. When he first went in the service, he got $50 a month. After that, it did go up a little as he made other rates. He got to be a second-class petty officer, Sona man. He was many times out in the ocean on a ship. Their purpose was to look for submarines, enemy submarines, I might say. And I guess they did see some and think. A sister-in-law, when that fall came, decided to give up her job and come home and live with her parents and help her mother in the store because Christmas time was coming on, and I was due to have my 3rd child around Christmas time. Believe me, I walked pretty careful and moved pretty slow and careful because I didn't want the great event to happen during Christmas. Brown's Variety Store probably did 3 or 4 months, as much business as they normally did in 3 or 4 months' time during the month of December. So they were claimed that she didn't feel too good and why she gave up her job. But I know it was because she wanted to be with me and my mother-in-law and help in the store so her mother wouldn't get too tired during Christmas. Well, January 11th, my 3rd girl was born, and she stayed Arlene stayed with me for 2 or 3 weeks until I got back feeling strong and healthy again. That spring, everything seemed to be going smooth as far as our health and so forth. So she went back to work for the Woolworth Company where she had cooked. And Mother Brown looked out for me again. I think it was about April that my husband got home to see his second daughter, third child, for the first time. While she was born, he was over in Bermuda on ships looking for submarines. Believe me, it's not a very comfortable feeling to have your husband out looking for enemy submarines on a boat. Of course, time went on. I had another garden that summer, and he got home about October 19th. I think it was on my birthday. He got discharged from the service in Seattle, Washington. And he arrived at our door on my birthday. That was a wonderful present.
When I came home from the service, got back to Bethel, my folks had bought the store and had moved upstairs and expanded the store some into the back room. My sister had lived upstairs before that and ran a boarding house. My folks persuaded me to come back into the store with them, and our lawyer advised us to form a corporation, which we did. And we divided the shares up equally between the 3 of us. Business was really good during the 40s and 50s and up until the big discount stores came into Rumford and Berlin. In 1954, my father had a heart attack and passed away. He died without a will, so my brother and sisters received part of his shares. Over the years, we bought all the shares of the store, and by 1980, B and I owned the business, and we owned all the shares. We bought goods from Portland wholesalers. Back in the 50s, probably, there were a number of wholesalers in Portland. We bought clothing from Sawyer, Barker & Long, Libby & Hansen, shoes from Bliss Richardson, housewares from Burbank and Douglas, school supplies, paper goods from Lauren Shott and Harmon. And we bought some from Berry Paper in Lewiston, bought toys from Turgeon Brothers in Lewiston. The last of our being in business, we bought clothing and shoes both from W.S. Emerson in Bangor. And of course, we bought candy from Benson Sullivan in Lewiston. We carried, throughout the years, we carried clothing, boots and shoes, housewares, yard goods, sewing notions, yarn, school supplies, toys, infants' wear, novelties, and of course penny candy, which was always a great hit with the children. Even years after, some man would come in with his son and he'd say, "I used to buy penny candy when I was a kid here." When we opened up, we had the store with a wood furnace. There was a wood furnace in the cellar when we came there. And we had one big register in the center of the store, and then we had a wood heater out back in the back room that we had that part with. And they really liked to stand over that register and get warm. We advertised every week with the Bethel Citizen all the years we were in business. We tried advertising with radio, but decided that we weren't getting enough out of it to pay, so we didn't stay with it very long. The incidents we had was, I remember a man came in and he wanted some shoes for a girl. So I took him out to show him the shoes, and he looked at some black patent leather sandals, and that seemed to be just what he wanted. So he said, "Do you mind if I take that shoe out? She just had an ice cream cone. She's really dirty. Could I take the shoe out to the car?" So I said, "Sure." And I guess he told me he wanted the left or the right. I don't remember which. Anyway, he took the shoe and went out to the car. I had several other customers, and I waited on them. After a while, I thought, what happened to that man with the shoe? I never saw him or the shoe afterwards. And a salesman told me that it was a racket. He said they go in the store and they buy a kind of an ordinary shoe. Then they go to another store and get the one for the other foot, and then they've got a pair of shoes. Had a man come in one day, and he had owed us a bill for, probably almost a year. We'd sent him quite a few bills, but I think it was a pair of sneakers he owed us for, and probably wasn't more than $4 was that. Anyway, he came in and said he wanted to pay his bill, so I got out the book to look up what the amount was. And he said, "Now I'm going to pay this bill. I think you'd ought to give me a discount." Well, I kind of assured him that since the bill had run so long, I thought probably we should collect some interest on it. So he decided he'd settle for whatever it was. We never was broken into until, probably about in the 60s. They broke into the stockroom, got about $50 worth of merchandise, I think, that time, which the police did recover some of it. But they tore the clapboards off the back of the stockroom, which was in the barn part. So that's how they got in. The police wanted me to stay there at night, and they would give me a gun, wait for them to come back in. I said, "Nothing doing." I didn't think I wanted to shoot anybody. Then the next time they broke in, probably 2 or 3 years later, I guess it was in the 70s probably, they took about $600 worth of merchandise, mostly dungarees and denim jackets. We never got any of that back. They broke the glass on the back door in the store and reached in, slid the bolt over and got in. Shoplifting, we probably had more of it than we realized. But we caught some people shoplifting, but we never turned anybody over to the law. We just kind of discouraged them from coming in anymore. When I got to be 65, I began to think of retiring. A lot of people said I didn't want to. But I said, "What do you want me to stay here until you come in someday and find me dead on the floor?" So we tried to sell the store on our own for a while. Didn't have much luck. So then we gave it to a real estate dealer. And he had it for about a year. And they didn't seem to sell it, so then we gave it to Gillies Real Estate. I guess they had it most a year. Then they said they had a customer that was really interested in the store and said they would, and the good thing about it, he had the money to buy it. Well, after we'd been dickering for quite a while, he said he'd give us what we was asking for it if we would take a second mortgage, or he would give us $10,000 less cash. Well, we decided we'd take the cash. And well, I was always glad we did. Anyway, we sold the store to Martin Mendoza in November of 1983. My mother had passed away in 80, and so she had left the building, which she owned, to my brother and two sisters and I. So Mendoza took over. He didn't last only about a year when he closed the store. So when we sold the store, we sold it building and the business, because then I had to pay off my brother and sisters. But anyway, so Brown's Variety Store went into history. The last of it, there was a real estate business in the building, and then it burned in 1991, I think it was. So it is gone. I'd like to close by showing my appreciation to the people of Bethel and the surrounding area for all the support they gave us throughout the years. They was the ones that really made our business a success. Thank you.
Jim and Bee Brown, as they stood in the midst of their store during their final hours there. As and with their successor, Martin Mendoza. As you look at the picture, you can get some idea of the tremendous variety of things that were all crammed into a very small area. Jim estimated at one point in our conversations that maybe he had 30 by 30 feet. But as we say about carrying things in a trailer, it's all yours until you reach the ceiling. And racks were always filled and shelves likewise at Brown's Variety. I came to Bethel in 1960, and I was very happy to find Brown's Variety. I didn't drive, well, I did drive, but we were a one-car family and had two young boys, so I was not about to think that every time I needed something, I was going to drive to Lewiston or Auburn or Portland or even to Rockford. So, being a home sewer, I found it very pleasant to go into Brown's Variety and look through their Simplicity pattern books. Now, practically had to make an appointment to get to a pattern book when it was toward graduation time or opening of school or Christmas or Easter, you name it. But the thing that was of interest to me as I was looking through my boxes of patterns was to see the price increases as the time went along. The first first pattern on the left is dated 1965, and it was 50 cents. The next year, 65 cents. And in 1967, the price was 75. Then, this very much used pattern was 85 cents, and that came out in 1969, which is just about when I was really intently into full-time working and going to school as well. And I also did a lot of my own sewing. That was 85 cents. Then coming along into the 70s, and interestingly enough, they did go in the very order, the increases went in the very order in which which the years came along, because I know that some patterns have always cost a little more depending on the number of pieces or potential outfits. Then going right along into the 70s, there was one that made a great cool summer dress for $1.25. Noticed how they'd gone up by 10-cent increments the late 60s, but now into the 70s they're going up 25 cents a gallop. And about 1974, I believe this pattern is that we're looking at now, and it's getting along toward the end of the time that days when I felt I really could take much time to sew. $1.75 for a nice tailored work dress. And finally, the last pattern, and the other day I found one of the blouses from this pattern that was finished, but the suit to go with it was still unfinished. And that was the most expensive simplicity pattern that I ever bought, $2, and all from Brown's Variety. So it's not only, just think about it, not only the patterns, but the materials were generally available in Bethel. A little bit toward into the 70s, we did have another fabric shop which carried some of the dressier fabrics that Brown's did not stock as much. However, it was possible to get all the notions for putting together what you wanted. Shoulder pads, underarm pads, ruching, seam binding, not to mention the thread and needles or elastic and those kinds of things. And at Brown's Variety, the elastic came in big rolls, and you could order off what you wanted. And Mrs. Brown and Jim knew how to figure if you wanted 1 3/4. They didn't say that their machine was only calibrated to quarters. So it was just one of those wonderful things to have in your memory of a store. It was also a place where we bought toys, many of the toys that we needed in the family, as well as dishes. You could go in and buy one side dish, one plate. They didn't come in sets of 4 or a 16-piece set. You could buy that many pieces. But this was one of the interesting things that sort of gave me the hint that the Browns were looking to wind down. There used to be ordinary kitchen plates and cups and saucers that were easy to replace, that you could buy per each. And these had used to come through one of their jobbers, but at the last event they were needing to order from Ohio and pay heavy freight that was almost Why don't you put your cap back on, Jim, because I don't want to be responsible for you getting sunstroke out here.
Out here every day.
So what's your weeding there right now? Is that something that's gone by for this year? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Troleus.
Oh.
Double buttercups, another name.
I was going to say, I saw some of those down at Mr. McLaughlin's garden.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked him what the real name was for them, and that's what he told us. So, yeah.
I forget to tell you what a man asked me the other day.
What?
And the other day, I don't know, get to talk about, I'm getting old,
Yeah.
I said, and
Yeah.
you know how long I could got.
Yeah.
So, you're the one that had to write up in the paper? I had to stop and think a while who he said. And I said, oh, you mean McLaughlin down South Paris?
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not quite as old as he is.
No, I should think not.
He's 97, I think.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah. Well,
Well, I hope I can sell this place someday if I want to.